It is the year 2472, and the Earth has suffered a great calamity. Hundreds of years of popular culture have vanished. Without the sacred films and texts for guidance, civilization is devoid of anything cool. Then, 3 incubation chambers are unearthed, and from within, men from the time of the great blockbusters emerge. Now, through highly interesting conversations, they share invaluable insight about what once was. The movies, the shows, the comics, toys, and books. This is
The Hyperspace.
Podcasting in the 25th century.
Welcome in, podcast pioneers, to the hyperspace, podcasting in the 25th century, the interweb's first and only podcast. My name's Matt.
I'm Jared.
Jared, what's up, man?
Hey, how's it going?
It's going well. It's going real well. You know why?
Tell me.
Because we get to talk about Picard again.
We do.
Mike, what do you think about Picard? Oh,
I haven't watched it because I suck.
Whoa, Mike, come on now. Don't be so hard on
beat
yourself.
himself up. Mike has still not watched season 3 of Picard, so he has opted to take the night off.
He's going to sit this one out.
He'll sit it out.
But you know what? As we always say, Mike's loss is our gain. Because with us, continuing our conversation last night, we have with us the co-host of the Kenobi Chronicles, the Cassian Chronicles, and the Carbonite Chronicles. We have with us, of course, our friend Lindsey. Lindsey, welcome.
Welcome back.
Thank you. Hello. I'm happy to be back. Jared, I was watching you rock in and out of focus there. I was like, is he going to get it back?
No, my camera's still tracking my face.
We mentioned this last week that, of course, our listeners know Lindsey is a huge Star Wars nerd, but little do they know that it's Star Trek. That's her first passion.
My one true love.
Her one true love.
It
So
is.
there couldn't be a better show to have Lindsey on than the one to talk about maybe some of the best Trek ever.
Yeah, certainly in the past 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And again, if you haven't listened to our first episode, we highly recommend you go back and listen to it. But more importantly, if you haven't watched season 3 Picard yet, I got some news for you. We got some spoilers ahead.
Oh, man. And, helping us with the spoiler alert prop comedy today is going to be our pal, Lindsey. Lindsey, tell us, how are you going to help our listeners avoid spoilers?
Ooh,
Got this right here.
Type 2,
You know what this
baby.
is?
That is a Type 2 original series Star Trek phaser. And when she pulls that trigger, all spoilers are going to be disintegrated. So here we go, Lindsey. You ready?
Yep.
Do it.
He's
Why
still
is
so
William
angry.
Shatner yelling Khan?
Hold on.
I don't-
Hold on.
Wait. Are you going to try to fix it?
I'm going to hold on. I think I need to. There we go.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
Use
okay.
the Type 1 phaser for the spoiler alert. Let's see what it...
All right.
Okay.
Nice.
There it is. That's it. That's prop comedy, everybody. Thank you, Lindsey, for participating in such foolishness.
Indeed.
All right, so we're going to be spoiling Star Trek Picard Season 3, much as we did last week. And when last we left, we were going to talk... What are you laughing at?
It's just prop comedy so stupid.
It's great. It's fantastic. Come on.
You know what I realized about it? It's fun when you're the one doing it.
See, that's why I do it every week. I love it. So we were going through talking about the characters, but from our last episode of the podcast, we saved a character for this show, and that character is the NCC 1701D, which got a surprise resurrection. Because the last time we saw the Enterprise D, it was crashing into a planet.
That's right.
If you will recall.
I don't think that anybody, I wasn't surprised because I think we all kind of figured that's what they were hiding in Hangar 12. Was it Hangar Bay 12?
Mhm.
It had to be, right? They had already given you every other deep cut
Yeah.
they could in this show.
And LaForge's daughter mentioned a few, like in episode 5 or 6.
Mhm.
Hey, what about what's in Hangar Bay 12?
Exactly right.
And that was never followed up on. So I was like,
Which is fine because even though you kind of figured that that's what they were getting, it still didn't dull the impact. I think seeing the ship the way they had it, it's never looked better in
oh, yeah.
any TV or movie episode or movie in
Yeah.
the franchise. It's the best it's ever looked.
Yes.
And they did it right. They did it right. Just like everything
Yeah.
else in this year, in this season, they did it right.
Yes. So when the doors open to the hangar, it's funny because Data starts blubbering. He he says something like, well, seeing the ship again has me. I don't. And Troy's like, yes, Data. I feel the same way. Like-
Troy absolutely can't stand Data with feelings. Have you noticed this? This is like her biggest headache, and it obviously plays on later in the show that we
I
can
feel
talk
like
about.
I feel like Troy is coming across as like a retired therapist. Like she's
Yeah.
like, I don't actually want to do this anymore. And
Yeah.
all of you, like you all just come to me because this is
Listen,
what I used to do.
hey,
But
Yeah, I just had this session with your son. You need to send some police over here to pick him up
I'm
right
not
now.
interested.
Everything's fine.
Yeah, he's some kind of psychopath. I don't know, but yeah. So, like Matt said, I think obviously they definitely saved some money to be able to. Oh well, of course, uh, the exterior of the ship looks great, and we get a funny exchange. Of course, in the movie Generations, the engineering section of the ship exploded, like the engines and all that part of it is gone, and we get some backstory that the engineering section comes from a ship called the Syracuse, um, which is where, of course, Terry Metalis went to college in Syracuse, New York. So, but then Worf, they make a joke at Worf's expense where Geordi's like, well, we couldn't use the E because for obvious reasons. And Worf is like, that was not my fault. Which, you do a little digging and you actually find out at one point Worf was the captain of the Enterprise E. In some of the ancillary material relating to this show. For anyone who's interested, there's an Instagram page called Star Trek Logs, I think it is. And it is actually it's an official Paramount thing. And you can click on them and there are all these little interactive videos that tells the history of the ships and the characters in the show. And I think in one of those log entries, we find out that Worf was captain of the E after Picard was. So kind of an interesting thing there. But apparently Worf, whatever he did to the Enterprise E, just there was no coming back from that. So
And they all look at him like,
yeah, that was not my fault. And of course, once he's on the bridge of the ship, he's like, I preferred the weapon system of the Enterprise
I love Downer Wharf on this bridge. He's just like, I don't know. I know you all missed it, but
like everybody's
was
walking
it as good as you think? I mean,
everybody's walking around thinking like, oh, Geordi, this looks amazing. And he goes, then I think it's Troy or Crusher who's basically like Worf, and he goes, it is perfect, Geordi. Like
that's so good.
He stops
it's funny.
himself.
After you're on the bridge of like the Titan and you see like the kind of the redo of how starship bridges and starships look like inside, and then you go onto the Enterprise D, and even Picard's like, I missed the carpet. It's like
I
this,
love that.
Yes.
and it's
Yes.
such a different look. It's so like even like take away the fact that it's nostalgic. Just comparing the two, one looks much more militaristic and much more akin to like Star Trek 2, like that kind of bridge, versus like the Next Generation. And it's such an interesting contrast. And I loved it. I thought it was great.
Well, because the Enterprise D bridge is actually lit.
Yeah.
There's actually
That's true.
lights on where you can see
Yeah.
things. But yeah, it is an interesting contrast with how the modern Star Trek sensibility of, making everything very dark and sleek and
mirrored and glass and
Yeah,
all that stuff.
I think
I miss the I miss the carpets.
okay. And I kind of miss the way the simplicity of the Enterprise D bridge, which is, the well, it's sort of like what's behind me, like the captain's chair. You have the captain's chair, you have first officer, you have the counselor, and you have, the helmsman's up here. But some of that gets lost in these new ships like the Titan, because the bridge is just this expansive, open, dark space with a giant screen in the front. But everything else feels, to me, a little haphazard.
You know what it reminded me of the most? Like when we saw it.
What's that?
It's the video where there's a pan. They do a nice pan of the consoles and stuff when they get on the bridge. And it reminds me of Riker coming in and sitting on the console.
Oh, and in that clip, he sits on the console and it starts making this cacophony of noise, and he ultimately blows up the ship.
Data. I need help in locating some library computer information.
We've got a coolant leak in the engine core. I can't shut it down. I estimate 2 minutes to a warp core breach. All hands abandon ship.
I'll send the link to you guys.
I think I've seen it now. Oh my god! Now I think I've seen that.
Because he comes up and goes, "Data, we need to," and he sits down, and all you hear is because he's sitting on the console.
Riker.
But anyways, the ship looks great. It's amazing. They pull the old Scotty routine and have the whole thing automated.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, Scotty in Star Trek 3 automated the ship so they could steal it. And Geordi makes reference here that there's drones loading up the torpedoes and everything. What's really cool about this set is that it was 100% rebuilt. There's no digital trickery here. It is a full set.
What are they going to do with that? They gotta leave that somewhere that people can just go to it, right?
They said, because of course the original set was destroyed long ago because they were still turning over TV shows then. They're just like, hey, we gotta use this for Voyager, we gotta use it for DS9. But they have preserved this set. They've taken it apart, but it is in storage, and and they have plans for it. They're not gonna just throw it in the dumpster.
That's great.
Yeah. I got to go to the set that's behind you, Jared. There was a built out version of it at a museum at NASA.
It was this Kennedy Space Center, right?
Yes. And it was the coolest thing, like one of the coolest things I've ever gotten to go do. Yeah. And I'm like, I want to go do it on every Enterprise or every bridge.
When did they put that at Kennedy? I have to go.
That was like probably 10 years ago.
Was it an exhibition or was it there permanently?
It was a Star Trek exhibit that was at NASA for a period of time. But this was NASA before the Atlantis, before all this stuff that's there now. I have my ticket from that day. It was $7 to get in. It's like $60 to get in now.
Wow.
It was like $7. I got in. I got to go. Me and my sister went in, and we were there on the second to last day of the exhibit being there. And we were in this bridge area for I kid you not, 30 minutes. No one else there. Nobody was there.
Wow.
No one came in. They had the City on the Edge of Forever gate there.
Yeah, the Guardian of Forever.
Yeah, that or whatever. Sorry. I forgot what the thing itself is called.
It's called the Guardian of Forever.
The Guardian, that gate was there. You could just walk in and out of it. It was so cool.
That's cool.
I can't believe I didn't go to that when it was here. I mean, heck, Matt, you would have lived here then. We should have gone and saw
what
that.
What were we doing?
I don't know. But you know what? Before, when we're talking about this, I did the thing.
Jared, you got to be on the bridge as an officer, so.
Oh, well, that's.
I did that too.
Oh, you did too? Where's your evidence?
Well, again, when,
destroyed.
It was destroyed in my garage, the humidity got. I had this tape for years, and then it was done. And you would have
Well-
laughed too, because like my outfit didn't fit. The collar was way over here, and it was
that's the one of the big reasons, because I love the movie era uniforms.
Yeah.
With they call them the monster maroons, and when I put it on, I've got like behind the scenes footage of me and my buddy Josh, just like, hey, do I look cool? And you're like, yeah, man, that's pretty awesome. But I did this thing in Las Vegas.
Yeah, me too.
Did you do the Star Trek experience?
Yeah, it was great.
Oh,
see, I'm jealous of that.
So you walk into this place and it's like Deep Space Nine. I mean,
awesome.
They have Klingons and Ferengi walking around.
They have Quark's bar, but to get to Quark's bar, you have to go through, and they have like the medallion, the Starfleet emblem medallion that Khan wore, like on like they have all these great. I think the Gorn was there.
Yeah, the Gorn was there. I have pictures with the Gorn.
And you walk down this long windings, whatever.
It's like a queue.
Yeah,
and it's the history of the future.
It was so cool. And then you wind up in Quark's bar, and it was really, I have to say, Star Trek's Galaxy's Edge, but Quark's bar, even back then, I think outdid anything I've seen in Galaxy's Edge.
Yeah,
it was that good. It was that good.
So
yeah,
jealous.
This one Klingon guy who was like 7 feet tall, like he was just like hitting on my wife the whole time. He would be like, "You are with him? Come and sit and talk to a real warrior."
No, it's like, but you'd have like a table of Klingons on one side. You have like Romulans over there, like actors doing their part, and I'm drinking like a Romulan ale, a blue Romulan ale. I'm thinking it's fantastic. It's the best thing in the world.
Yeah. Did you ride the ride that they had?
I don't know. I didn't ride the ride.
Okay. Here's what happens when you do that. Like, so you think you're going into this thing like you think you're doing some chintzy, like it's a Star Trek themed thing. So you walk into this room and all of a sudden these people show up in Starfleet uniforms going, guys, you got to come over here. You got to come with us. You got to come with us. We got problems. And so your whole group goes into this room and you're standing there and they're like, okay. And it's just this nondescript room. And so they're like, okay. And then they hit their comm badge and they're like, okay, 12 to beam up. And then you hear this noise and everything goes black. And then, but the whole time you're hearing the transporter sound and then this blinding flash of light. And when your eyes adjust, you're standing in the transporter room of the Enterprise. And I'm just like, well, what's going on? And they're like, come on. And you go out this door and you run through the Enterprise hallway. And there's like crew members there. And they're like, come on, everybody, keep up. You get in a turbo lift and you come out on the bridge. And Riker shows up, like Jonathan Frakes shows up on the view screen, and he's down in engineering because something's going on. He goes, you need to get these people down to the shuttle bay. But you're on the bridge. I mean, it's a 1-for-1 perfect. And I was there with my dad and Terry, and I was just like, what's how? I just want to stand around here. And then so you go back down and you get in like a simulator. It's like Star Tours after that. But that part of the ride, you actually get beamed up to the Enterprise.
God.
I have to like YouTube that and watch that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's really crazy.
The amount of like jealousy I've had growing up being in a Star Trek of not ever having gotten to go to the Las Vegas Star Trek experience is so profound. If I could time travel,
they stopped
like
it, didn't they? They took it away.
Oh yeah,
right?
no,
it's not there anymore.
I actually got a mug from someone from Tampa Bay Comic-Con that's like from the Star Trek experience. I was not there, but they had mugs from it from back in the day, and I was like talking to this guy about, oh my God, I wish I could have gotten to this, and he gave me the mug for free.
Oh, well,
that's awesome.
I was like, thank you.
Quark's
Lindsey,
bar was pretty great. I'd go back there.
And when you're in the queue and you're going through the history of the future, if you look up, they had 3 gigantic models.
Yeah, that's right.
One of them was the Enterprise D. I mean, these things were 30 feet long. And they were then they had the Enterprise A, my favorite, and then they had the Voyager hanging.
A DS9 set with Quark's bar and a Voyager. I'm gonna
cry.
Where is it all now?
I would definitely look it up on YouTube because
just be more jealous.
But it's really cool. And we've digressed here, but I mean,
Yeah.
it's
That's
Star
why
Trek
there was a
talk.
part
It's
two.
Star
There's
Trek
part
talk.
two.
But anyway, yeah, but seeing the bridge when they're all on the bridge, that I mean, at that point, I know. I mean, I felt that this show wasn't going to let me down at that point, and I was just like, man, because you're seeing things that you never ever thought you would see again. I mean, even when the show started, I had no idea they would end up on the Enterprise D and doing
I
the
also,
stuff that they're doing.
I also didn't think it would be so well done. Like they literally take the whole last part of the episode to do it, and they like take it in with all the reverence that you want them to, and they say
Yes.
everything you want them to say. And I was crying, and I was like, "Why am I?" I wasn't even as emotionally invested in this show, but this scene is making me cry.
Well,
It's so good.
you know, it's something about, and I think Matt said it very well on our last episode. He's like, this particular season of television, it gave you those couple decades to miss these people. It's not like the movies that were coming out, one right after the other in the 90s,
Right.
which it's like, oh, hey, here's another adventure with Picard and buddies. This was like, these people are older, they've got the gray beards and the white hair, and
It's not bad makeup. They're actually older now.
yes, they're older. And when Patrick Stewart, there's one piece of that rebuilt set that was from the original.
Which
can you guess what it was?
The plaque.
The plaque. The plaque was saved from the original set, and of course they give it a little love when Picard goes up to it and sort of, I guess he like touches it. And
nice. Is that Will Wheaton's?
That's the worst it's ever been, Jared. Oh, Will.
Right. I went out of focus right as you mentioned Will Wheaton. You know that, right?
Poor Will Wheaton.
Yeah, the ghost of Will Wheaton got you.
Okay. There we are. Here, I'll
I
just
haven't talked
sit
about
like
that
this.
at all, about how he's completely absent.
Well, that's fine with me. I mean, I just can't. I want to watch those Ready Room videos because they've got people on there I want to hear from, but it has Will Wheaton on it, and I have to take nausea medicine before listening to Will
but I
Wheaton.
mean,
I never was bothered by Will Wheaton, but like as a person.
But think about this. I mean, like Terry Matalas put this together. He crafted the season very carefully. He put in all the deep cuts that were going to get all the fans excited, and he left out Will Wheaton. He left him out where there were so many other aspects of Star Trek brought together. That part was completely left out. Now I know
he had an out for that
because season 2, because space took him, right?
Well, because Will Wheaton at the end of Next Generation was transformed into this other kind of life form, and he's off traveling the galaxy.
But then doesn't he show up at Riker and Troy's wedding as just regular?
Yes, he does, which doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
So he was left out on purpose, and thank God he was, because he's like a speed bump.
Well, Lindsey, you mentioned this last year because you said to me when you finished watching season 2 of Picard, you're like, and I think this was you, but you're like, when Will Wheaton showed up, it was weird. He's like, it's like, because you said he was like TV game show host Will Wheaton or something like that.
I might have said that sounds like something I felt. So I probably
because you said that it felt like he didn't feel like he was delivering. He felt like he was like delivering lines and not necessarily like acting.
Yeah, and he felt like he was Will Wheaton.
Yes.
Not Wesley Crusher.
Yes.
Which was weird to me.
Like if Will Wheaton appeared at a convention playing Wesley Crusher, that's how he would deliver his line to the audience.
Something like that. Well, if they, and plus, I mean, his brother is so much cooler.
That's to me, that's the part where it's like so damning, because they literally just went, Crusher had another son, and this is his new son.
And he's so cool, and he's handsome, and he's dashing,
and he's British, and he's like a roguish type, and he's like hitting on all the ladies, and they love it.
Picard's son.
I know,
Will
but
is
his name is Jack Crusher.
but well,
Wesley's father's name.
well, that's true because
the other one wasn't
It's
worth the
just
father's name.
rough. It's just rough.
it's a very strange because you know what I think that even if Picard had known, because Jack Crusher was Jean-Luc's best friend back in the day, he might have named him Jack.
I completely agree.
Which,
I'm just
but
saying,
it was weird.
If I'm Wesley out
Sure.
in space and time, I'm looking down on that and I'm like, well, I'm not even gonna come back anyway. Name
I don't need. I'm in the
son,
fifth dimension.
naming it
I
my
don't care.
dad's name.
Yeah.
I don't even want to come back.
Sure. Well, I mean, he does get a name drop at some point in the series. She's like,
think
I lost him to
my-
space, and I'm about to lose my other one.
Right, and that was
I did like that they at least acknowledged he existed, because it's.
Sure.
I get that they don't want to make it weird with his character or his acting. I don't know what, but I feel like it's weird sometimes to not acknowledge a character because of that at all. Like, you need to say something.
And you're right, Jared. They did very, very little mention, and that's all they gave him, which is fine because nobody really cared about Wesley anyway, and the crew that people cared about were featured very well in season 3.
I would agree with that.
And for those listening to the podcast that loved Wesley Crusher, I'm very excited for you. And
find a new podcast to listen to. Wesley Crusher writes. No, I'm just kidding. That's terrible.
But so they take the Enterprise D, and they found out that the Borg enclave, I guess it's not really. I guess it's kind of like a messed up cube, is in orbit, deep orbit in Jupiter.
It's in Jupiter's red spot,
which is
cool.
I love that idea because it makes sense. With you have the red door, and you see Troy see the cube in this red cloud, which doesn't make a lot of sense until you find out it's in Jupiter. So it's just off the coast.
Which is, that's really cool. I did like that.
That shot of it in there, I was like, this is sick.
Yeah. I like when Star Trek shows us planets we're familiar with. Like, I always like it when we see shots of the Enterprise orbiting Earth, or, there's a couple of shots in the motion picture where the Enterprise is zooming past Jupiter and all its moons. And to me, that's really cool because it's like, hey, I know that planet. That's a real planet.
It feels good. I know this isn't about Picard, really, but remember how I was talking about last episode about how when Enterprise first started, I was very into everything they were doing, and I remember the trailer. I don't know if you guys remember the trailer for this show, but it was
I don't think so.
It was such of the time period. So the trailer played the Calling song, the Wherever You Will Go song. Do you remember this music? So you should have known from this trailer what the music was going to be like, but. So this very like whatever Rocky whatever trailer, but then there was a line where he says, "Trip, my love," says it'll take you from the Earth to Saturn in 6 seconds or something.
I remember that, yeah.
And I remember I always loved that line because I was like, oh yeah, they're just figuring out how to go fast here.
Yeah.
And I loved it. And
but,
I love when they do stuff in our solar system.
Yeah, and they did that in Generations when the Enterprise B gets launched, and Cameron from Ferris Bueller Day Off is the captain.
Oh, yeah.
And he goes, today we're just going to go out past the asteroid belt and around Pluto, just a quick trip around the block. And it's like, oh, well, that's so cool to hear it said like that, because it's like, for us to get to Pluto, it would take something like 100 years on sublight or some crazy crap like that. Maybe not that long, but
it sounded accurate, Jared.
Yeah. Well, no, I guess the Voyager spacecrafts have left the solar system now, and they were launched.
They're in deep space
in
now.
The 70s.
Yeah, they were launched in the 70s, and they just left the solar system in the past 5 or 6 years. So,
which is 50 years.
That's pretty cool. I mean, one of those is going to be captured by the Borg and made into V'ger, and it's going to come back and try to destroy the Earth.
I'm not complaining that the way it turned out, but it would have been kind of neat, since this is kind of the end of the Borg, hopefully, if they had tied it somehow to V'ger a little bit.
Well, that's always
I
been,
agree.
that's always been something that's been put out there in some like comics and some books and
I mean,
stuff.
they wouldn't have to do much. She could have been like in her monologue to him, been like, when we sent back your probe,
yes,
to when we, whatever. She could have like mentioned all this stuff to connect it, but whatever. I'm not complaining.
But okay, so the Enterprise goes to Jupiter because they pick up the signal. But and here's one thing, the show for me, there's a couple of nits to pick for me. Like, so why is it so important that they network the fleet?
I thought that too, right?
That seems to me like something that they felt like they had to make happen to make this Borg takeover make sense.
Isn't it because if they didn't successfully assimilate every ship to the point where they could take over, any that escaped were destroyed? Like that one ship that gets away, because they managed to, they have more oldies on their ship, I guess, than youngsters.
It was the Excelsior that got away.
And they take over their ship and they sent it out to the firing squad and they blew it up. And it feels like they do it just to have complete control over everything.
So I think that's right. And I think you just have to assume that this is the long game that the Borg and changelings were playing here, and that before the DNA, because the DNA thing really only took place over the course of like 2 days, right?
Well, it seemed like it.
But I mean, like from the time they stole his body to because that's when they got the DNA.
Sure.
It was happening.
Well, no, didn't they steal it? Was it only 2 days from?
No, it wasn't 2 days, but it was a couple days. It was.
But you say it was a week.
Fine, let's say a week. So that part was the final part of it. But you have to assume that there were changelings working themselves into positions for quite a while, and that whole thing could have been part of that whole networking the ships together. They could have taken place over a couple of years where they put this plan together to push it through, the system to get it done.
You did have Admiral Shelby, she was in command of the Enterprise F, and she said, hey, and her whole speech was, hey, we're demonstrating this glorious new technology, how every starship will become one and all that. But I don't think they ever sold me. So you're saying you think that's part of the changeling plot?
I think it has to be. And I think even Geordi was hinting, because, Riker, who quite recently was in charge of a whole fleet, didn't know about it. Nobody knew that the ships were networked, right? It's such a new thing that Geordi, who's, high up in the Commodore ranks, he knew about it, but it really wasn't disseminated throughout the common knowledge of the Corps. So, because everyone's like, well, they're finding you because the ships are talking to each other. So if you come close, you're going to get discovered. That's how they're tracking you.
Yeah.
And so nobody knew about it, not even like Shaw, and Shaw's a captain. So it's this thing was kept kind of close knit. So it has to be part of the conspiracy that the changelings were working on the long game. And
if they never were able to get the DNA thing to work, because like you said, that was only recently. So the timeline, by the time that the wormhole or portal weapons are stolen till now, that's only a week to the end.
Well, it seems like all that stuff happens pretty close.
So Picard and his son bond over the course of a week.
I think they really bonded over the course of like 3 days.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't love thinking about that.
It's like Yoda Luke time frame here.
That's true. But and also they're in extraordinary situations.
Sure. So then the changelings' plan, if the DNA thing never worked, was to get all those ships networked, because then maybe if they could just take over one, they could get,
because the whole plan was to just destroy Earth's defenses and take Earth down first, and then they said after that it'd be like dominoes falling. So, but regardless,
universe we got going on.
Yeah, it was a cool. I liked the fact that they had to use the Bounty's cloaking device, because they figured out, again, possibly a contrivance that this networking thing works like line of sight, and if they're invisible, then they can't. But it still made for a cool.
Yeah.
Like when they cloaked and then they just showed up and they just started shooting.
I personally
everything.
didn't like the line of sight thing because it felt very like primitive compared to what's going on. But you can make up whatever you want with a cloak, and
Sure.
so I
The
mean, like,
cloak itself is made up.
you don't have to like do the line of sight thing. You can be like, hey, when we're cloaked, they can't find us, and that I would be like, okay, I completely buy it.
Right? Why
Sure.
doesn't Starfleet employ cloaks on every ship?
Oh, you can't.
Well, they can't.
Why?
Can't.
Why
It's a
again?
great convention.
They signed a
don't remember
treaty.
this.
They
I don't
signed a
remember this.
treaty. They talk about it in Deep Space Nine because they had to get like a big exception to have the Defiant have a cloak on it.
Okay.
Because they
okay.
had, and at the beginning they had to have a Romulan on board the Defiant.
It's a
because-
fake.
So, so if you go back to old school Star Trek, there was an instance where I think the Klingons and the Romulans and the humans were all going to destroy themselves, and is kind of almost like a Q kind of
the Organians.
the Organians, which are like these omnipotent kind of beings, stepped in and said, guess what? You're all going to be destroyed unless you come to an arrangement and sign this treaty that says that you're basically, and what it was kind of like the nuclear arms race
It
happening.
was the Organian Peace Treaty.
The
is what
Organian
they
Peace
called it.
Treaty. And that kind of set boundaries. And I think that established neutral zones and stuff like that, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh.
And that's where that kind of stuff said, this is going to be your space. This is going to be your space. That's going to be your space. And you can't have cloaking devices. Okay, you can keep them because you already had them, but you're not allowed to have them because that creates an unfair advantage. So they try to level the playing field in a weird way.
I don't think the Organians did all that stuff.
I thought they did.
But
I might be making that up.
I think you're making it up.
I like what I made up though.
Well, it's good. You can make whatever you
I
want.
like the stuff about the neutral zone because you made me realize I was like, you just hear them talk about the neutral zone all the time, and I'm like, why is it neutral? Who decided? Who's
Well,
in there?
it's the neutral zone. Yeah, it's just the buffer between certain space, Klingon space.
The Federation Klingon neutral zone, also known as the Organian neutral zone, and the Organian treaty zone, was a region of space served as a neutral boundary between the United Federation planets and the Klingon Empire during the 23rd century.
Well, okay, but that doesn't say anything about Romulans
Well,
or cloaking devices.
No, but
because
that is
Romulans in the original show, Romulans had the cloaking devices.
Yeah.
But they started sharing technology with the Klingons in the last season of the original series, which is why Klingons got cloaks. And that's why in Star Trek 3, we have a Klingon ship that has a cloak on it.
But it is illegal to have a Federation ship.
The Federation doesn't use cloaks because, they're
when
they're better than that. Except when they need to, which is why they had to have a Romulan on board to sign off on it. Which is anyway.
But anyways,
I thought it was cool.
There's all kinds of Easter eggs, by the way, in that fleet where ships are being destroyed. They have
I paused it and saw that screen of all of
there's like the Hakaro Sulu. There's like all these great deep cuts are in there. And
nice.
Oh, wait, by the way, we should talk about one of the greatest nods that they gave you as they're going towards Earth. We have Chekhov's son,
Walter Koenig,
who's now the president of the Federation of Planets,
named for Anton.
Anton Yelchin.
For his portrayal as Chekhov in the JJ movie.
What a great tribute. I thought.
I mean, it's fantastic because first of all, you got Walter Koenig, an original series actor, playing his own son, named for the late actor who played young Chekhov in the new movie. It just feeds itself.
It was great.
I was afraid I was going to knock myself out of focus.
You just can't help it.
But I heard he recorded 2 versions of that spiel. The one we heard did not really, there wasn't a lot of Russian accent to it. But he also recorded one in a very thick Chekhov-like Russian accent. But they decided to pull back on it and just let Walter Koenig sort of just use his own voice.
I think that was for the best. And he
Yeah, I
still
agree.
does like a little bit of one. And one that makes sense that Chekhov's son would have.
Sure. Maybe, maybe he wasn't around his father that much or something.
It was a great
around English or other language speakers more than his father was. And so his accent's just not as.
But it was a nice nod. And also sort of a callback to Star Trek 4 when the Federation president is telling Kirk and his crew, do not approach Earth. because it's a lot of that dialogue was repeated verbatim.
Yeah, and we got to see Space Dock get knocked off its perch and start to. Now, I'm assuming the Space Dock was destroyed.
Yeah, I think they rebuilt it.
Well, it's
later.
rebuilt at the end because there's a year that passes.
So maybe it wasn't destroyed. So it was knocked off its orbit.
Well, it looked like it was getting pretty well jacked up when they were all firing on it. They're like, Space Dock is falling.
It was cool. I mean, that's heavy stuff. And so there was a lot of really great visuals. It was nonstop action. I mean, they really, Jared, to your point, they saved their money for the last episode.
Oh, yeah.
And, I felt, is it going to get crushed? Are we going to is it just going to feel compressed and it's like rushed ending? But it didn't feel rushed.
No, we got a straight up Return of the King ending.
I mean, it was
five endings.
It was amazing.
Well, they wrapped everything up with 20 minutes left in the episode.
We got Picard and Riker Picard, Riker, Worf, which by the way, Worf and his one-liners, I will join. We'll make it a threesome.
Yes. And he's, do you even hear yourself?
So you got these
you guys quoted the same.
What?
It's your favorite line. It's your favorite line. You guys
it will be a threesome. Yeah, but that was funny. That was hilarious.
It was funny.
But it's nonstop. But we get them on the cube, and we get this messed up Borg queen who's she looked like something out of Aliens.
Oh, it looked awesome.
And you find out that she's cannibalizing the organic parts of her drones to sustain herself. So
amazing.
And you see the sort of the remains of.
Now, I didn't watch all of Voyager, so this is a byproduct of what happened, what Janeway did to the Borg. Right? She unleashed a virus to the Borg herself, right?
It's a great.
And this is what happened. It decimated the Borg completely, and this was their last ditch effort to survive. This was it.
And I feel like, I've talked about this one. This sometimes feels like a prop, or the other shows feel like props to this show. So initially I was like, man, they kind of took the Borg stuff, the way it ended from Voyager, and they kind of undid it. But then I don't think they actually did undo it. This was the last breath.
Yeah, this was the Hail Mary.
Yes, it wasn't like they came back in it whatever. It was literally just the cockroach of the Borg still being around, because that's what they do. But then. So I actually think it didn't really take away too much from that awesome family stuff in Voyager.
She was all messed up, and of course it was voiced by Alice Krieg, who did her in First Contact and in the Voyager finale. And a different actress played her. She appeared several times in Voyager with another actress. The Alice Krieg has a very distinct voice, and I thought it was a nice touch to bring her back. I tell you, one of my favorite shots of the show is when the Enterprise swoops in above Picard and Worf and Riker.
Well, before we get there, we have to talk about the Lando Calrissian run.
Oh yes, through the Death Star,
which is fine. So you have Picard and Riker and Worf trapped inside the Borg cube, and they've located that the matrix that's creating the problems in the dead center of the cube, and they need to get to it and blow it up. But if they blow it up, then everyone dies, and Data annoys Troy even more. So I can do this. And after a great scene, by the way, of it creating havoc on the outside of the cube. By the way,
yes,
the old D is dropping some hurt on that Borg cube, and it looked great.
Oh yeah. Well,
Beverly
it was.
Crusher.
Oh yeah, and she's like, yeah, I've picked up a few things in the last 20 years, because everybody's looking at her like, what? Because she's firing all the torpedoes and the phasers and everything
manually. Yeah, because they're like, oh, all the auto isn't working. You're gonna have to do it manually.
It was so cool. It's great.
Well, I mean, the D has never looked tougher than doing all that crazy stuff, and I love the Lando Calrissian, because why not?
Yeah,
and Terry Matalas owns it. He knows exactly what he's doing. He's like, yeah, that's the Millennium Falcon. I'm going to have a Millennium Falcon run through the Death Star because I can.
But to your point, it did something the Falcon didn't do. It went all the way and got her captain back. which is awesome. It went right above him to what you said.
Oh yeah, it just swooped in, and like that was that shot it really had a great sense of scale because it just looked massive.
Mhm.
It comes in and they're all just like looking up at it. And I was like, okay, well, that's like a full season's worth of budget right there to
Yep.
do that shot.
To
And
show
then-
the scale of the ship and the scale of the cube.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, because the
Scale
Enterprise is
Jupiter.
this big next to that giant cube. But
Mhm.
then, that whole scene was fantastic. And then the board queen is like, "Bah, ah, blah," and then, blows up. The whole thing blows up. I guess Jupiter blows up. Who knows? Becomes a sun.
Uh-huh.
There was a touching moment between Jack and Picard in the weird Locutus world that they had. So,
Oh,
they
yeah.
have
Yeah,
that
that
nice
was,
little moment.
well, that was great. He's like, I'll stay with you. I mean, that was touching.
I do
I-
feel like that whole scene and that whole relationship really is benefited by how good of an actor both of them are. Because I feel like we were just talking about, have they been bonding for 3 days? Like, if
Mhm.
you really want to buy that, they have to really sell it, and I feel like they
Mhm.
do. Too.
They both do.
and I think the show did a good job giving us just a handful of scenes, like the flashbacks of like Jack in the bar when Picard's talking. You can really, they really build up the feel that he's always wanted to know his father. And when he finally had the opportunity, it was a big moment. And
Wow.
it wasn't like out of the blue. It's not like
Well,
they did a good job staging that.
That
for me.
scene when he's in the
Yeah.
bar and Picard tells him, the only family I needed was Starfleet. And
Yeah.
you think in any other Star Trek episode, that's like a banger. It's like, yeah, you tell him. But in this, it's like a gut punch
Yeah.
because it's
Mhm.
his kid basically saying, oh, okay, well, all right. Well, that's all I need to know about you.
Mhm.
And which I thought was just a fantastic moment in
Yeah.
the show. Well, we get, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say I like that they don't ever actually talk about that moment. It just like lets you think, oh, does Picard remember that moment or not? Like, we know obviously Jack remembers it, but I like that they don't ever talk about it. At least
Yeah,
that
I
we
agree.
see.
Yeah. Well, then, of course, we get our flash forward a year. We did cover this a little bit on the last episode, but one thing we didn't talk about, and Matt, you had some things to say about this, was the appearance of John Delancey as Q in the post-credits
Okay.
scene.
So let me speak my piece, then have at me. So it's not that Q appeared that I didn't like, okay? Because I think it was actually pretty cool. And I've always liked Q as a character. He's a bit of a cheat code, but I still like him. I liked how he appeared, but the weight of this cameo was ruined by season 2. Because if Q had not been in season 2, and this is when you see Q for the first time in this whole Picard show, it would have been an atom bomb. It would have been huge if Q had appeared for the first time at the end of this show. It would have been great. But the fact is, season 2 was so lackluster and so boring and so bad. And they wasted his good character in a bad season that this felt like it didn't even matter. Like I could whatever. It's like it was a shame they even wasted him in the show. That's my opinion.
Okay. Well, well said. I mean, I would agree. I think it would have had more weight if we hadn't seen him
Yeah.
in so long. But I think for me, I only saw the first 2 episodes, so I was like, "Hey, yeah, man." And I know that he's dying or gonna die or whatever, but of course they just instantly brush that off, like, "Oh yeah, you think so linear? Don't worry about that." I'm not gonna die ever.
I think I liked that too because it made it feel like no, he will die or has died or will have died. But he lives outside of time, so it
But
doesn't
he
matter.
can go wherever he wants. But
Yeah.
there's one interesting thing
I like
that Terry Matalas said, and I know we're wrapping it up, but he said in the finale of Next Generation, All Good Things, there's a scene because Q is obviously part of that episode. At the very end of the episode, he leans in to John Luke and acts like he's going to say something. And John Luke's like, what? And he goes, you'll see. Terry Metalis said he was going to tell him about Jack.
Oh no!
So he sort of obviously retcons that little moment.
But
still, it's kind of cool now. If you go back and watch All Good Things,
Ties it all together.
Yes, because of course you can do make him say whatever you want.
Yeah.
But he goes, I like to think that he was going to tell him about Jack.
Well, I mean, look, as a Star Trek fan, a lifelong fan, I couldn't have been more pleased with what we got in season 3. It was by far and away some of the best Trek I think made to date.
Mm-hmm.
It was the most fitting kind of end to characters that I really didn't realize I had missed as much as I did. And it was just great TV, just a really good story with a lot of great action and great acting and a lot of anxiety. And it was a fun watch.
And I'm like, I look forward to Thursday mornings, and crazy. It's for about a month there. I mean, Wednesday morning you get up and watch new Star Wars. Thursday morning you got this brand new awesome Star Trek. It was a geek's golden age right there. But I would look forward to talking to you guys about it every week. Like, Lindsey, I'd see you at work. Hey, did you watch it yet? and Matt, of course, I'm texting you like, hey, dude, what are you watching? What time are you watching today? I'm going to rewatch it. What time are you watching?
How many shows can you say that about? That you're that excited about?
And it's just was, like I said, I've been hard on Star Trek for the past few years. I needed to continue that. That's terrible. I'm sorry. I've been very critical of recent Star Trek, and for me it just felt good to be excited about it again, and it's not something you can fake, and that's probably why we don't have a Discovery discussion show, because I just don't like talking about things that I'm not super enthusiastic about.
Yeah, that's a good point. You felt like you came home with this one.
But like Picard, yeah, and like Lindsey, like you said last week, the show feels like it was written by someone who knows and loves that 80s and 90s Star Trek. And it feels for the first time like we got a show that acknowledged 80s and 90s Star Trek.
Yeah. And I'm like, when they're making all this stuff, this new Star Trek stuff, I'm like, who are they trying to appeal to? All the people who liked Star Trek when they started bringing all this back were the people who liked it in, like, obviously the original series too.
Yeah.
But I'd say by and large, the most people were into Next Generation, Voyager, Deep Space Nine.
Well, sure, that was
not giving us anything.
Yeah. And I think now with all this, of course, I heard that the online petition for Star Trek Legacy has exceeded the petition that they did for a Captain Pike show. And they got the Captain Pike show. And this has exceeded that by about 150,000 signatures. So I think they'd be crazy not to acknowledge this Star Trek Legacy, whatever that entails. Who knows? I think this show could be where you get this show could be where fans of that Star Trek can come home,
Yeah. Look, I mean, we could have a show next year about, Janeway and the daughter she never knew she had.
Which I don't know if they'll go there.
That's 7. That's 7.
Well, yeah, it's 7. That's true. But look, you have 7. There's no way you're not bringing in those other characters.
I want everybody. I want B'Elanna. I want Tom.
Next Generation had their turn. So
I was going to say I want Harry Kim.
And here's what I'm holding out for. Clone 30-year-old William Shatner.
No.
Let him steal the Enterprise A from the museum, and he goes around on adventures. We got the deep fake. We got the Luke Skywalker technology now. We'll see. But I'm just saying, like with Legacy, I think you open the door to all this stuff because it's called Legacy. And the legacy could be the legacy of the new characters, Jack, of course, the LaForge sisters, the progeny of our characters and their new adventures, and of course the legacy referring to what's come before and their further adventures.
So I read, we've talked about this before, but like the extended universe stuff that happens after all of the shows. So I read like 2 books that supposedly happen after Voyager. Those are all retcon now with this show, because obviously everything that happens with 7 is different. But I also read like 4 or 5 books about what happens after DS9. And I'm like, they were great, but I'm like, what happened to Cisco? I need to know. I need to know.
The actor who played him went crazy.
Yeah.
Well, don't say went crazy.
Hi.
Have you seen those clips of him and William Shatner?
Yeah, he's a little off the
Oh,
wall.
man, William Shatner's trying to interview him, and William Shatner's the sane one.
I've heard
He's like,
how they went down.
Hello, Avery, and Avery's like,
okay,
I'm on LSD.
Listen,
I'm
he's
going
a
to play
great actor, though.
Hey,
Listen,
hey, Bill.
he's a great actor.
Let me play you a song, Bill. What do you want me to play you a song about?
I'm on the
Bill's
pipe
like,
organ right now.
He can do all the LSD he wants as long as he acts the way he like.
Well, I'll tell you what. If we get a Star Trek Legacy show, we will be back here on the Hyperspace to talk about it, and we will certainly have our co-host Lindsey back, our resident hyper fan.
Hyper fan.
Oh,
I like that.
Oh, I see a cat behind you.
But thank you for listening, and we highly recommend, if you have not watched it, go watch Picard season 3. Go watch season 1; it was pretty good. Skip 2, go right to 3. And if you're a fan of Star Trek, you're not going to be upset. You're going to love it.
And look, there's 800 episodes of Star Trek out there, and the hyperspace has been woefully lacking in our coverage. There's no reason we can't go backwards. We can't talk about other things that we love, and of course, having Lindsey here for her perspective, we're going to be talking about Star Trek on the hyperspace for a long time.
You know, we need to kind of like make a HMS Bounty show where we can just go back in time and talk about all the Star Trek we want.
Man, we're brainstorming right now live on the air, so I love it. So anyway, gang, we're going to wrap it up there. We're going to head back to the Fleet Museum and put our ships back where they go. And please, season 7 is rolling on here on the hyperspace. We've got more to come. We're dropping them weekly right now. So, don't miss out. Make sure you're subscribed. Tell your friends. And I'd like to say live long and prosper. And we'll see you next time.
You know you can't live without this content, so subscribe to The Hyperspace, podcasting in the 25th century. Follow us on social media. Leave us a review, and join us here next time as we take you into the 25th century.